The braces are off. Can you tell? Can you tell that it sounds like me again?
Gorgeous, baby. You're gorgeous.
This is the Josh Podcast Show, the anti-podcast podcast on God and man. The show that everybody's talking about. The show that will become a necessary part of your weekly mental diet. The show that picks up where JoshRolfe.com leaves off. The show title that uses the word podcast 4 times. Introducing your host, Josh Rolfe.
All he needed was a filter. Actually, not a filter. All he needed was the filter. The air filter. That simple little papery, cottony, spongy contraption that allows the air to pass through, keeping out the bad stuff, to feed the fuel and flame that causes combustion and makes the modern world go round. The filter. No air was getting through. There was fuel, but no flame, and therefore no combustion. The soil, dust, grass remnants, and grime now covered the once new, clean lawnmower filter with a dark, dirty layer of debris that clogged it up and now rendered the entire machine utterly useless. The mower looked like every other used mower in suburban America, way past its warranty, yet this one was no longer working like it was the last time he had mowed the lawn. Even though the mower looked the same as every other lawnmower, it wasn't the same. This particular brand was no longer manufactured. The lawnmower making company had folded over a decade before, about the time he was given the mower by his father, who was a longtime employee of the mower manufacturer. And the father never quite recovered from the loss of his 30-plus year mower-making career that had become intertwined with the aging man's identity. His father's forced retirement resulted in losing his footing with the world, which soon led to illness, and shortly thereafter, his father passed on. The gift, a mower, was given by father to son as the son began his way in the world. For the son, it was a mostly happy time when he was young and carefree, the whole world ahead of him. The whole world was ahead of him, and he felt like he was ahead of the world. Entering home ownership was getting more difficult for his peers who were still struggling to even save. But he was making big strides and charting his course. Newly married, he had saved every penny to put together the down payment and finally lived the American dream, even though interest rates were sky high, hovering at around 15%, back when the president was fighting the Cold War and the Federal Reserve was fighting a war against inflation. The lawnmower was nothing special, other than the fact that it represented his father's livelihood, but the young man didn't exactly make that connection, even as his father was gone. The mower didn't add anything to his happiness, and it didn't take anything away. It was just this useful machine that would be replaced by another machine someday when it no longer became useful. But now it's 1994. 10 years and 2 presidents later. Mortgage rates have dropped. The Cold War ended. The filter that was most likely the cause behind the mower not starting, the one that couldn't be cleaned without disintegrating under the sink, couldn't be easily replaced. And he had tried the Yellow Pages. He called every small engine repair shop in his town with no success. He began calling outside his region which would mean a higher phone bill next month. But he justified the more expensive calls because he knew if it didn't get fixed soon, his unkempt yard would soon turn away prospective buyers. You see, he had to sell that home. It was the only way he could pay the creditors who were ready to take it all away. His home and his motorcycle, which had become his only mode of transportation. The bank said he had to sell. He had to sell everything in the next 6 weeks, or it would all come crashing down. What made it more difficult was that he couldn't borrow a mower from a neighbor. They had all turned on him after the walls came crashing down. They believed her and the accusations, some of which were true. Some had been exaggerated. All of them combined left him isolated. He was left alone in the sense that he was literally living alone, but most importantly, or sadly, he was alone. It was bad enough that she had left him broke. She wanted to also leave him broken. He had been strong for far longer than most would under the same set of circumstances, even though the layoff, well, that wasn't the worst of it. It was that she had won custody of their only child. The boy was now 7 and very bright, but it didn't help that he lived in another state. The child's stepdad spoiling him in a way that he could not. And it also didn't help that the child was named after his dad, his real dad, the man who needed the filter. The lawn grew quickly, and a few more weeds than normal were exposed. Even though he tried pulling the weeds, within a couple weeks, the entire yard looked very poorly maintained. Prospective buyers would slow down and then quickly pass the house. Why go inside when it looks like that on the outside? He now wished his dad was still around. Dad could fix anything. Why wasn't there a generic filter that fit this model? Why did that company go under? He'd sit on the back porch and stare down at the mower. He needed it to work, but it wouldn't work. He prayed, "Can you send me a miracle? You made the earth and man in 6 days, Lord. Why can't you fix my lawnmower?" The filter lay on the ground nearby. He went over to it, picked it up. He held that filter in his hand. He wondered if his dad had installed this filter in this mower years before, while knowing his job was soon ending. But at the time, his dad would have known that he still had a house. He would have known that he still had his son. His dad still had the stuff a man needs. But the job his dad had held for 30 years apparently was what he had needed the most. His dad's job was his oxygen. It was his air. He looked down at this grimy filter, studying every part of it. The air is forced through. It fuels the fire. But if there's no oxygen, no air, there's no fire. There's no nothing. All he needed was a filter.
Thank you for listening to the Josh Podcast Show, the anti-podcast podcast on God and man. For more information, visit joshpodcast.com. Follow Josh on Twitter at Josh Rolfe. That's Rolfe, R-O-L-P as in podcast, H. Now go and have the best day and night ever. And have fun.